The development and fall of civilizations during the classical period, 600 BCE to 600 CE. Let's get started. We will be covering Rome, the Persian Empire, classical Greece, the Mauryan Empire, the Qin and Han Dynasty in China, the Gupta Dynasty, and classical Americans. Although this lesson encompasses the classical empire, keep in mind that some of these empires or dynasties have been in existence outside the classical era as well. Let's start with Rome. Originally a monarchy during its pre-classical foundation, Rome also fell in the form of a monarchy by 509 CE. However, between this time frame, Rome experienced several political shifts, most notably its time as a republic. A very limited one at first. Only the rich and powerful could partake in politics until 287 BCE. In which the low and middle class plebeians won the right to vote and make laws. Laws were continuously being made to maintain order in Roman history. One example could be the Laws of the 12 Tables in 450 BCE, which was able to unify Rome under a common law. By 27 BCE, however, Roman Senator Octavian Augustus took power by himself and began the Roman Empire, expanding it in large proportions. Rome was already expanding previously. As Rome expanded, it was able to control the entire Italian peninsula by 275 BCE. It further went abroad and encompassed many regions. Greece, for example, was conquered by Rome in 148 BCE. During Octavian's empire, the first 200 years of its influence is considered the Pax Romana, Roman peace, a time of relative peace and economic growth. Eventually, however, Rome fell due to a range of issues: disease, deforestation, and the inability to adequately defend territory could be credited to the environment. Rome's trade routes facilitated a large amount of movement among people due to the creation of walls and roads to aid and protect trade, which also aided the spread of disease and invaders. Rome's large girth meant that soldiers couldn't adequately defend all of its territories, seen as Rome was sacked by nomadic Vandals near its end. New technologies such as the stirrup from Central Asia allowed faster movement and stability on horseback, aiding trade. However, it also, again, aided the spread of disease. Let's move on to the Achaemenid Empire, the first of the Persian empires. Beginning with the rule of Cyrus the Great, the empire rapidly expanded from India to what is today called Turkey, or Asia Minor. The girthy empire is recognized to be able to unite the first three centers of civilization: Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India. Due to this large empire, there was a lot of diversity. At least 70 distinct ethnic groups were part of the Persian population at its peak. Field irrigation and farming methods such as the Qanat system were able to make farming more efficient and expedient, thereby also increasing the population. The national religion of Zoroastrianism was practiced by the Persians. The monotheistic religion was unique in contrast to the current polytheistic religions around the region. Due to the size of the empire's diversity, rulers such as Darius I instituted a system of bureaucracy, utilizing lower-level governments in order to control the provinces using officials called satraps. Common currency was also instituted, which made trade more efficient and worked to unite the empire. More government-sponsored events, such as the Royal Road, aided to unify the empire and aid trade. The Royal Road stretched along the empire, connecting with smaller networks to aid in travel. Darius also sponsored the construction of caravanserai, which promoted travel long the distances of the Royal Road for business. Originally tolerant, rulers such as Xerxes honored all subjects, in his case constructing a gate of all nations to welcome anyone. Drawing back to bureaucracy, however, this eventually worked to weaken the government by decentralizing the power of the upper rulers such as the emperor. Eventually, satraps were corrupt, and then the Achaemenid Empire fell. Let's talk about Greece. First of all, Greece consisted of a series of islands separated by large amounts of water in the Mediterranean Sea. This, first of all, led to differences in culture and communication. A central government would not be possible in this situation due to the difficulty it would be to communicate and administer laws effectively. Therefore, the highest classification of order would be called the city-state. Different city-states had different forms of government. Some city-states were monarchies, and some were democracies. A single city-state would be called a poli. Citizenship was granted only to free males in democratic city-states, such as Athens, which was a patriarchy. Athens, for example, a Greek city-state, developed democracy at first. It was a monarchy, and then an aristocracy, and then a direct democracy. But people got tired of having to vote for every single law, so they decided to make it more of a representative democracy by electing representatives. These soon became tyrants and abused their power. They were eventually overthrown, and most of the city-states of classical Greece became representative democracies, with limits. Beyond Greece, however, established colonies around the Mediterranean were allowed a large degree of autonomy, although everyone had a shared Greek identity regardless of where they were. The colonies were established on the island of Sicily, Naples, Marseille, France, and the western coast of Asia Minor. The Greeks were highly respectful of the religions. Being polytheistic, they created Olympic games to worship their gods through strength and competition. They also had a distinct art style, as seen in the Parthenon in Athens. Buildings had columns and a slanted roof. On the panel on top, citizens would carve ancient Greek myths and legends. They also had a very successful bureaucracy in the form of city-states, as again, a centralized government would not be possible. The separation of city-states allowed independent developments of culture as well as economics. India in its history has rarely been unified by one central government. The Mauryan Empire was one exception. It unified India by one central government, emerged as a dynasty in the 4th century, and reached its peak around the 3rd, in BCE. In order to maintain centralized control of India, the government divided India into provinces. Each province had a capital city and was ruled by a prince, a representative for Indian government for that particular province. Ashoka Maurya, one important figure, was a great Indian governor and a warrior. He bowed Kalinga in eastern India and won. Ashoka established an efficient tax system and used tax money to improve infrastructure and end slavery. Ashoka's achievements in culture included his advancement of Buddhism in India. He sent out missionaries to far-flung regions such as Greece and Egypt. Using their advantage along the Silk Road to the full extent, they traded with the West and East at the same time and was able to spread their religion and culture along the roads. The social structure in India was the caste system, a social pyramid which started from one's birth and determined one's position in Indian society. No matter the achievements or merit of a certain person, if that person belonged to a certain caste, there would be discrimination facing that person, even up to today. Public law enforcement by the government was modest. The ancient caste system was a law in itself, practiced by almost every single member of the empire, if not all. Encompassed in the beliefs of Hinduism, people would not commit sins or break laws in the hopes of being rebirthed into a higher caste. Moving eastward into China, the Qin dynasty was the first of 2 Chinese dynasties in the classical period. In 221 BCE, the Zhou dynasty has ended prior to a time of violence. The Warring States period, a period of time in which China was in disarray and war, as multiple dynasties controlled certain parts of China. Qin Shi Huang created an army which he used to overthrow the previous Zhou leaders, and the Qin dynasty was created after the conquering of the rest of the small rulers. However, a similar fate occurred in the end, as generals overthrew the Qin dynasty in 207 BCE. Although Qin was able to unify China, his methods were very brutal. The dynasty would not last long. However, his accomplishments were essential for the future success of later dynasties, such as the Sui, Tang, Song, as well as the success in Han. Of Qin's accomplishments, he gave peasants the right to own land, which contributed to surpluses and the wealth in the Chinese economy. Standardizing everything from Chinese script to coins and measures allows more efficient trade and effective communication. Through his unification of China and his expansion of territory, laws were reformed and standardized to a common set of rules which were enforced by a very strong government, which set up order for the success in Han. Furthermore, after his death, a tomb was constructed which included over 7,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, each demonstrating a sense of individual realism not seen before in any Chinese history. Shortly after, the Han dynasty arose. Founded by generals who overthrew the Qin leader and his son, the Han dynasty would last for over 400 years, sharp in contrast to the less than 30-year rule of Qi Huang and his son. Han Wudi, the most significant ruler of Han history, would lead an expansion of the empire towards the north in Korea, the south in Vietnam, as well as to the west, as he ordered the conquest of the Xiongnu in Central Asia. During Wudi's rule, his policies contributed to the Pax Sinica, similar to the Roman period of peace, the Pax Romana, a period of relative peace within China. The economy and population grew as a result. A thriving population of both middle and upper classes increased demand for luxury goods trade along the Silk Road. The Pax Sinica ended due to a combination of diseases spread along the Silk Road and through China. Other plagues such as the bubonic plague combined to killing almost 25% of the Chinese people. Revolts further weakened order and eventually overthrew the dynasty. Revolts such as the Yellow Turban Rebellion was a bloody conflict of massive proportion. Land distribution and hunger struck peasants due to later Han emperors' inability to address such problems, which soon contributed to the fall of the empire. However, before such problems occurred, in order to maintain control of the large expanded territory of China, Wu Di needed to expand his government as well. A civil service exam was instituted in order to maintain a well-working government which hires employees based on merit, not in relation to current employees or bribery, as was popular before. The exams allowed China to begin a trend of using strong bureaucracies to administer policy throughout the region. Going back to India, the Gupta Dynasty arose in 240 CE and ended in 550 CE. It was the last major Indian dynasty of the era. It reached its golden age around 500 CE. The Gupta dynasty had intense contact and trade with European merchants and Eastern merchants in China, and grew rich due to trade because of its central position within the Silk Road, as well as the Indian Ocean. The Gupta was known for their significant changes in mathematics and medicine. They pioneered surgical procedures, and doctors in Southwest Asia and Europe eventually adopted their medical practices. Nalanda, one of the most ancient universities in the world, was based in northeastern India. Upper-caste children attended schools only. Painting, sculpture, and literature, as well as other forms of art, were supported by the Gupta government. In its complex social structure, religion and social order were hand in hand. Religion was a dominant force in India. Buddhism was spread to China through trade and missionaries, and the caste system was still in strong effect. Nevertheless, the Gupta dynasty was very ethnically diverse, partly due to its large area. Moving on to a totally separate hemisphere, a series of civilizations encompassing the regions of Central America and Upper South America, which were grouped together as Mesoamerica, provided societies which developed similarly to Eurasian civilizations, yet creating unique cultural aspects of their own. All these societies practiced similar polytheistic religions, and many civilizations created temples, if not all. First off, there are the Mocha, the Maya, and the Teotihuacan. These three civilizations were most notable within this period. First off, the Mocha, taking the same region of influence as the Chavin in an earlier period, rose around 200 BCE. Climate changes and further inconsistencies led to a fatal downfall of the Mocha. They built temples for worshipping their gods such as the sun and the moon, and the temples were centerpieces for large cities and fortified walls. Irrigation systems were developed as an essential need for successful and efficient crop farming due to inconsistent water supplies through rain. Trade was local between communities, selling surplus goods. Social structures with communal work were called alus. Moving on toward the Maya, one of the most notable civilizations in America. The classical period for the previously existing Mayans led to certain changes in politics. Decline due to deforestation and therefore resource competition. Due to a large amount of territory, centralization was a challenge. However, city-states were formed similar to Greek city-states due to this, and sometimes one city-state would dominate its neighboring states. Human sacrifice to gods were common, as there are many gods. A ball game was made to worship gods similar to the Greek Olympics. They made cultural achievements such as mathematics and astronomy. The Kirkul Observatory and the concept of zero, for example. Art and decoration within buildings was elaborate. Lastly, the Teotihuacan, founded around 150 BCE, was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. Possibly fell to large fires. They built extensive agriculture which provided surplus and growth for the city. Elaborate class systems placed rulers and priests in high command, whom created temples for gods. And although not much is known about the entire civilization, elaborate city planning and gridded structure patterns indicated a strong government. In summation, during the classical period, we see certain trends. There are large amounts of empires with large spans of territory. In each, they have facilitated their spread of ideas, disease, and commodities through trade routes, such as the Silk Road. You can see a cyclical pattern, such as the classical era being important for progression into the post-classical era. Development of new religions to cope with the times are similar as well. For example, during the Warring States period after the Zhou dynasty, near the beginning of the classical period, religions such as Buddhism and philosophies such as Confucianism were invented in order to maintain order and create a sense of hope for believers. The large progress of development within these civilizations during this short era can be credited to the Silk Roads and the Indian Ocean trade route. Communication between these routes was facilitated in order to trade objects, but in turn also led to the exchange of ideas which were essential for the knowledge of the world and growing development of technology.